Our next stop is a sprawling suburban street just outside Boston, Massachusetts. In the midst of these traditional homes stands a two-story modern masterpiece that may not look like its neighbors, but certainly does reflect them, literally.
The mirror siding has done some really neat things, some really neat effects that I could not have anticipated. In the morning, the sun hits the mirrors, that bounces down and kind of warms up our courtyard. Now, in the afternoon, the sun is really coming from the other side. What happens is that sort of hits the trees across the street, and that's reflected into our facade. So while the face of the building is a bit dark, actually what you see is a very bright, twinkling landscape. So it does some neat things.
But the mirrors aren't just a design element. They were actually a necessity. Stephen started this build in 2004 as a newlywed. At the time, a modest single-story shingled house was all that the couple required.
The house was built several years ago when we were just starting out. It's very modest, but probably ambitious in terms of its ideas.
But just 3 years later, Stephen's life was changing. He had to rethink the master plan for his one-story contemporary home.
We always thought we'd have one-story house. The second kid was sort of a surprise, so that changed everything.
The addition to the family meant changes to their home, too. And the only way to build was up.
This two-bedroom, two-bath house wasn't going to work anymore. We really needed to extend, expand, and we decided to create a second-floor addition.
But this traditional neighborhood wasn't having it. And the Massachusetts town planners weren't too happy either.
I needed to figure out a way to make people feel comfortable. The idea of having another sort of box on top of my first box made people nervous. So I came up with the idea of having mirror siding. And they asked me, what would we see if you have mirror siding? I said, you're going to see your own house reflected in mine. They love that. They love seeing their own house in my house.
So Stephen turned a potential problem into a success. The home now melts into the trees, reflecting the greenery around it, allowing the neighbors to admire their own homes. Inside, the lower floor houses the bedrooms, the kitchen, and the main living areas. The focus here is on lateral living, with views to the greenery and outdoors. But Stephen wanted a complete contrast for the new upper floor.
So the idea about the first floor connecting laterally, on the second floor we were going to connect vertically. So in this case, when we look up, we see the clouds, you see the sky, and that's why you have white, you have light blue, and really the concept of the upstairs is really about this lightness, being up in the clouds, feeling very, very different in contrast to what's happening on the ground floor.
Here, in this cloud-like interior, the family can relax and play. The adults also have their own study. The central space is whimsical and fun. There are raw, unfinished, disjointed columns, and a specially built fort for the kids. Ultimately, Stephen turned a potential problem into a real solution. All it took was a little reflection.